The wire cleared at 9:01 a.m., blinking green on a monitor that hummed under tired fluorescent lights. The escrow officer, a woman with a neat bun and a voice that could read a verdict, recited the routing number like a hymn, 26,009,593. I slid the confirmation across the closing table, the paper catching on a coffee ring. Buyer, Northwind Acquisition, LLC. Seller, Walker Fixtures, Inc. My last name was on the second line as history. For years my parents, Joe and Elaine, called me a failure. I didn't argue. I built a trust, formed an LLC, and bought their company. Before we proceed, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you are listening. The room was too bright for the way it felt. My father's jaw moved, but no words came out. My mother smoothed the edge of a manila folder until it curled. Their attorney pretended to read the disbursement schedule. Across the table, the escrow officer stamped the first packet, the notary seal leaving a fresh circle like a watermark on a family photo. No one said my name. They said Northwind, as if saying it enough would explain the distance. Years of loud judgments had trained me to keep my hands still. "You're not built for real work," Dad had told me at a Sunday dinner, sliding the mashed potatoes as if he was passing down a verdict. I didn't challenge him then. I learned to count to 10 and let the numbers do the talking. Numbers like 3,215,000 on a wire line and a payoff letter to lender that charged prime plus a sting. Buying the business wasn't a victory lap. It was triage. The plant on Eastbrook Road ran 3 shifts and 84 lives depended on payroll landing every other Friday. If a rival swept in under covenant default, the saws would go quiet, and the men who taught me to measure twice and cut once would be told to pack their lockers. I wasn't here to humiliate anyone. I was here to keep the lights from flickering. On the closing table lay the stack that decides fates: a release of lien, a bill of sale, a tax escrow agreement, and a landlord estoppel. The wire alone wasn't enough. Control was ink. One signature we didn't control could still send this whole thing back into the shadows, and everyone at the table knew it even if they didn't look at me long enough to admit it. Northwind was a mask I built on purpose. Trusts are for privacy and for patience. The less my last name appeared, the fewer midnight moves we'd see in the warehouse. There was a reason my name wasn't on the glass. Not yet. We'll get there. The escrow officer shifted to the disbursements. To Joe and Elaine Walker, an amount after taxes and fees. To Bluestone Capital Partners, the exact figure from the payoff letter, pennies rounded by the bank. To counsel, to the title company, to the county recorder. My parents' attorney drummed a pen, a quiet percussion under the fluorescent buzz. My father finally looked at me and found nothing to push against. "Congratulations," the officer said, stamping another page. I nodded. If gratitude lived in that room, it stayed silent. I thought of the warehouse smell, sawdust and lacquer, and the men who clocked in before dawn, not the names on the wiring instructions. Taking this company wasn't about settling a score. It was about stopping the kind of shortcut that kills a name in a town where names still matter. Then Luz texted. Her text lit my phone at 6:42 a.m. on March 28. Payroll hit a day late again. From Luz, that wasn't gossip. She's the one who signs off on time cards, who knows which press needs a bearing and which guy is saving for a baby. "A few deposits still pending," she wrote. "People are nervous." I stared at the message under the quiet hum of my refrigerator, coffee dripping slow into a chipped mug from the shop picnic. One day late can be bank lag. Again is different. Again is cash. 2 Sundays earlier, Dad had raised his glass over pot roast and declared 2022 our best year ever. He said it twice, as if repetition could harden a story into steel. The cousins clapped. Mom smiled the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Then he slid the mashed potatoes toward me and said almost cheerfully, "Jordan, you're not built for real work." I smiled back and made a note that has never left my pocket. Best year ever doesn't square with late payroll. It doesn't square with Luz texting instead of shrugging it off. After breakfast, I opened my laptop and went to the Secretary of State's UCC portal. It's a public window into private strain. I typed Walker Fixtures, Inc. and hit search. There it was. Filing date February 7, 2023. Secured party Bluestone Capital Partners. File number 2023-0007189121. Collateral, all assets, including accounts, inventory, equipment, chattel paper, and proceeds thereof. A blanket lien is a flare in daylight. Asset-based lines aren't inherently dirty. Sometimes you need to bridge timing. But a $1.2 million line filed in February after a year Dad calls the best means something else. We were pledging the whole shop to keep the lights warm. ABL money comes with a metronome, borrowing base certificates, field exams, prime plus a bite, fees if your receivables age out past 60. You don't pay for that unless you have to. I called the CFO. Greg Hanley picked up on the second ring, voice clipped, like a man who had already put out 3 fires before 9. Greg, it's Jordan Walker, I said. I'm seeing a new UCC from Bluestone. How are we on cash? He exhaled the way people do when they're choosing their words. We are fine. Focus on your apps, Jordan. Then the line went dead. He didn't ask how I knew. He didn't ask what I'd seen. He hung up as if I'd reached for a rope he was busy pretending didn't exist. After a lifetime of being waved off, that dismissal focused me like a lens. I texted Luz, which banks are pending. She sent 3 initials, WF, Cub, and a regional credit union, and a photo of a breakroom whiteboard that read, "Thank you for your patience," in blue marker. She added, "Controller says paychecks delayed file. 3rd time this quarter." Paychecks doesn't delay, companies do. ACH cutoffs aren't a mystery. If you miss the window, Friday becomes Monday, and a man with child support due feels it like a pulled tooth. Luz knows that. So do I. The dinner replayed in my head with new lighting. Dad's second scotch, the way he said margin expansion like he'd found a magic lever. Large Q4 installs, he bragged, and our new purchasing program is a game changer. Mom kept rearranging the peas on her plate. We are booming, he said, and passed the potatoes with the verdict attached. You're not built for real work. I've learned to let statements like that sit untouched until they show their seams. A best year brag paired with a blanket lien means the glow was on paper. Accounts receivable look impressive until day 68 turns 90 and your vendor wants COD. The shop can be busy and broke at the same time. I pulled up an email chain Luz had forwarded in January about a new supplier. The subject line, Midwest Panel Brokers Rebate Program. Attached was a PDF one-pager with a glossy logo and a promise of 8% marketing rebates credited quarterly. I'd never heard of Midwest Panel Brokers. We've bought maple and cherry from real mills for decades. Middlemen with rebates don't add value, they add distance. The one-pager listed a PO template with a field called Rebateage. Unusual, I flagged it and didn't tell Luz why. I drove to the plant that afternoon under sky the color of unfinished MDF. On Eastbrook Road the air always smells like lacquer and hot metal. Joe, the foreman everyone calls Uncle Joe though he isn't, nodded at me without breaking rhythm. You here for lunch or a lecture? He grinned. Neither, I said, and stood by the receiving dock a full minute just to listen. Busy. And behind the motion, a hum of worry like a motor about to seize. In the break room, a guy named Travis tugged open a soda and asked no one in particular, "You think checks will bounce?" Another answered, "They better not, rent's due." That sentence is a pulse. It tells you more than a dashboard can. Out in the parking lot, I called a friend who runs a shop 2 counties over. "You ever work with Bluestone?" I asked. He paused. "Only when you're out of runway," he said. "They move fast, but it ain't cheap. You okay?" "Fine," I lied and wrote down his field exam warning. I'm not allergic to leverage. Used correctly, it's a tool. But tools in the wrong hands become weapons. Peril late, a fresh blanket lien, a new vendor peddling rebates. Those aren't random. They rhyme. That night I pulled an old spiral notebook from a drawer and wrote 3 dates. Feb 7, UCC. Mar 12, best year ever. Mar 28, payroll late. Beneath them, a question, where is the money going? I drew a line to Midwest Panel Brokers and left the arrow open. I stopped asking for reassurances. I started building a file. In the morning, I would trade guesses for documents. And if anyone tried to wave me off again, I'd hit record. Paper doesn't panic, people do. So I started with what's legal and what lasts: records. I called Harper and Lane LLP at 7:18 a.m., and a partner there, Dana Harper, replied by email 11 minutes later. Our state is one-party consent. If I'm a participant, I can record. Don't intercept anything I'm not part of. Keep timestamps, chain of custody notes, and original files. That was enough. I set a Zoom H1N on my desk, tested the levels with the fan on low, and slid new batteries into my pocket like they were insurance. I called Greg back and hit record. He didn't pick up. Fine. I moved to the people who weren't guarding the gate. Vendors will tell you what cash won't. I spoke to a rep at Midland Hardware who mentioned, offhand, that Walker Fixtures had switched a chunk of spend to a broker early in the year. Midwest Panel something, he said. They offered a rebate program you probably can't refuse. Rebates are either volume-based reality or cover for something more creative. I wrote it down. At 10:03 a.m., a junior accountant named Emily Cho mis-CC'd me on an email titled Weekly Flash, Week 12. My address must have lived next to the outside CPAs in her autocomplete. Attached, a PDF of AR aging, a bank rec screenshot, and a cash bridge that bled red between Week 8 and Week 11. DSO, 68. AR 90 days, 19%. The bank rec showed 3 ACHs pending, including one I hadn't seen before, Midwest Panel Brokers LLC, $182,400, per note cleared. I fired up QuickTime and screen recorded the whole thing while the PDF loaded. Files get deleted. Recordings don't argue. I opened the Secretary of State's site again and pulled every UCC on the company, not just Bluestone's blanket lien. 2 older filings showed equipment financings. Then a Department of Revenue tax warrant popped up in county records. Warrant TW221741, filed January 13, 2023, $24,613 for fourth quarter withholding. Another smaller, for sales tax, $8,402, released in March. Best year ever, shops don't flirt with payroll tax warrants if their cash discipline is real. I dropped each into a timeline in Notion: date, source, amount, document link. A clean spine helps when emotions try to bend the story. I hired a forensic accountant, Marcus Lee, CFE CPA. We'd met through a coffee he did on a friend's acquisition. Marcus works like a machinist, no flourish, just tolerances. He built a model from the Weekly Flash, prior year P and LS, and the GL detail Luz had quietly exported to a password-protected folder. Account 6450, Professional Services, showed a pattern that didn't belong. Round number entries to Midwest Panel Brokers, LLC every month, fluctuating between $172,000 and $189,500. Memo lines like consulting fee, Q1 program, and marketing services. Total run rate, about $180,000 a month. He tied those entries to bank ACH confirmations by date and amount. It's hard to hide a round number that repeats. We looked up Midwest Panel Brokers LLC in the state registry. Organized in 2019, manager managed, mailing address 1189 Westgate Drive, Suite 204. That suite also belonged to a holding company tied to Greg's brother-in-law, a guy named Daniel Proctor, who ran a small fabrication business and, according to property tax records, listed the same UPS mailbox. Maybe coincidence, maybe not. We didn't need motive to map money, but connections help judges see what spreadsheets already know. The rebates themselves were theater. If a vendor is giving you 8% back, it should arrive as a credit memo against COGS or a reduction in price, not as a consulting fee paid out of operating cash. Marcus built a bridge that showed gross margin eroding while consulting held steady. In plain speech, we were paying full price at the front door and then paying an extra fee at the back door so someone could call it marketing. Kickbacks dressed in business casual. I needed eyes where ledgers couldn't go. Atlas Investigations took the call. Licensed in state, low profile, They prefer minivans to muscle cars. I gave them 3 addresses: the plant on Eastbrook, the millwork yard, and a storage facility 2 miles south I had heard mentioned once in passing. On April 11 at 2:08 a.m., the camera caught a rented box truck easing up to Eastbrook Storage. Building C. 2 men offloaded shrink-wrapped pallets of premium maple panels and rolled them into Unit 4B. The lease on 4B wasn't in our company's name. It was held by Walker Advanced LLC, formed April 3, registered agent of service downtown. The name overlap wasn't an accident, it was camouflage. The photos arrived with timestamps and a short note. Same forklift observed at your shop, matching scrape on the mast. Meanwhile, QuickBooks told a quieter story for anyone patient enough to ask. Luz's export wasn't a full backup, but it included an audit trail, TXT, entries under user, G. Hanley admin, approved bills from Midwest panel brokers 5 minutes before month-end closes, then posted journal entries that smoothed margins. JE 2389 on March 31, Dr. Consulting expense $180,000. CR accounts payable $180,000, vendor, Midwest Panel Brokers LLC. On April 29, JE 2402, Dr. Cost of Goods sold $180,000. CR inventory adjustments $180,000. Narrative, quarterly rebate true-up. It's a neat trick if no one reads both sides. The AP aging at month-end showed the liability. The true-up buried it. The Slack messages of all things were the most honest. Emily's weekly flash link took me to a Slack Connect thread where finance posted spreadsheets before filing them. Before the controller locked it down, I downloaded a JSON export. Black text on a gray background, timestamps stacked in a column. Remember to process the quarterly rebate before closing the month. From Greg in app purchasing at 4:52 p.m. Use the standard memo, someone replied. The word rebate sat in quotes, alone, like even the keyboard didn't believe it. I kept notes the way a carpenter keeps offcuts, never know when you'll need the right strip. Chain of custody, file name, source, time. A copy of every recording went to an encrypted drive. Marcus color-coded variances on a printout that I slid into a red folder labeled Midwest. I didn't need to raise my voice. The numbers were loud enough. In the middle of this, Mom called. I heard you've been asking questions, she said, soft, as if volume could change content. I hit record and watched the H1N's levels bounce. Are we okay with the tax deposits? She asked. You know how those penalties pile up. She wasn't talking about a hypothetical. I didn't answer out loud. The line clicked quiet after small talk about Sunday and pot roast, but the question told me everything. Public confidence, private worry. The pattern congealed fast, cash tight enough to trigger a bluestone line, rebates that only flowed one direction, inventory bleeding after midnight into a unit leased by a lookalike LLC, an audit trail that showed our CFO greasing the edges at close, a Slack reminder that treated a euphemism like a normal course of business. The story, smart purchasing, volume programs, could probably persuade a room that wanted to be persuaded. Our documents could persuade a judge. I called Harper and Lane again. If we surface this, do we risk a fire sale? I asked. Dana's answer was what I expected. If a bank senses fraud, they sweep first and ask questions later. If a buyer is known, competitors circle. If a family fight goes public, employees bolt. The only way to protect the people who make the place run might be to buy the company without tipping my identity until the ink dried. I'd explain the structure when it was safe, not before. So I put the mask on. I registered a new domain, set up a clean email, and built a checklist big enough to carry what came next. I added photos from the storage unit, cross-referenced ACH descriptors with bill numbers, and stapled a printed Slack message to a page in my notebook that still smelled faintly of lacquer. I didn't need to be dramatic. I needed to be exact. When the file felt heavy in my hands, I slid the H1N into my coat and printed a plant tour checklist with ISO 9001 prep typed across the top. I circled one line in blue ink, DSO, and wrote a second in the margin, Midwest rebate, who processes. In the morning, I would walk into the shop with coffee and a clipboard, ask plain questions, and let the recorder hear what the walls had been told to keep quiet. The badge printer squealed and died mid-loop, so Greg uncapped a Sharpie and wrote my name on a blank sticker, Jordan Walker Visitor. He pressed it onto my chest like a label on a box and tore the carbon stub for himself. ISO research folks in today, he asked casual. Pre-audit, I said, lifting the clipboard. The H1N sat in my jacket pocket, red light tucked under the lapel, listening. He took the lead down the hallway where the floor epoxy shines like a frozen river. I handed a cardboard tray of coffee to the front desk and made small talk about weather and schedules. Clause 8.4, supplier control, I said as we passed purchasing. I'll need the approved vendor list and last management review minutes. Greg nodded without slowing. They're in the binder, he said. We've got a program now, saves us 8%. In the production bay, the chop saws sang. The air tasted like oak dust and solvent. I clicked my pen and kept my tone neutral. What's our DSO now? 68 days, he said, eyes flicking toward a monitor where an aging report glowed faintly. We float vendor credit and get an 8% rebate from Midwest Panel. Net, we're ahead. Rebate comes as a credit against price. He smiled the way people smile when they've rehearsed. Marketing co-op, industry standard, we true up quarterly. He kept walking. Dad intercepted us near the finishing line, hand on a rail, varnish curling gold in the light. Look who's playing auditor, he said, a laugh writing the words. Jordan, this is just smart purchasing. You tech kids get twitchy when something doesn't fit in a spreadsheet. I like puzzles, I said. Where's the co-op agreement? Greg's throat clicked. Legal has it. Which legal? I asked. In-house red binder or Harper and Lane? Dad waved off the question as if it were a fly. Come on, let me show you the new spray booth. Men I grew up with kept their heads down. Travis slid a cabinet across sawhorses and didn't look up. Uncle Joe, the foreman, not my father, touched his brim and returned to a jig he'd built years ago with my initials scratched in the corner. The shop smelled the same. The numbers I'd seen did not. We stopped at receiving. I leaned into the ISO pretense. Supplier evaluation forms, I asked. Midwest Panel on the AVL yet? Temporary approval, Greg said. But they're fine. We've increased volume and they share marketing dollars. Big Box loves that story. Marketing dollars is the kind of phrase that buys time. I made a note. Any vendors pushing COD. Some pro forma talk, he said. We are current. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I glanced and saw a line that lifted the hair on my arms. Check Unit 4B at 2 a.m. Bring a camera. I locked the screen and slid the phone back beside the recorder. I didn't change expression. Greg watched me watching him. Anything else for ISO? He asked. We've got a truck at 3. 2 things, I said. How are you booking the 8%, COGS offset or consulting expense, and who processes the quarterly true-up? AP uses the standard memo, he said, too fast. Ask Emily. We moved past racks of cherry door fronts and a forklift with a scrape on its mast I recognized from Atlas's photos. Visitor badge jammed this morning, Greg said suddenly, as if remembering a script. He reached for the printer, then shrugged. Printer's finicky. I'll keep the stub and staple it to the log. He kept the stub. I took out my phone as if checking the time and snapped a photo of it on his clipboard, catching the handwritten 10:14 a.m. beside my name. Chain of custody doesn't always look like an evidence locker. Sometimes it looks like a casual picture near a vending machine. Dad narrated the tour like a host. Margins are up, quality S up, and our purchasing program gets us paid to buy smarter, he said, tapping a pallet with his boot. Your apps ever do that? He grinned at one of the guys, and the guy grinned back because that's what you do when the boss performs confidence. Smart is measurable, I said. Which quarter did the rebate start? Q1, Greg answered. It's a rollout. We'll see full benefit by summer. Send me the policy, I said. ISO likes documentation. Luz stepped out from behind a parts cart and gave me the briefest look, half warning, half question. Her mouth didn't move, but my pocket did, vibrating once more, the same unknown number silent now. I kept walking, pens steady. In the conference room, I asked for a copy of the management review minutes. The binder arrived, tabbed, crisp, and missing the page where supplier changes should be logged. Must have been left on someone's desk, Greg said lightly. My pen paused, then moved again. Put it in the data room, I said. He blinked. I smiled. For ISO. We ended the walkthrough where we started, by reception, where there's a photo of my parents breaking ground with shovels that never saw dirt again. Greg peeled off to take a call. Dad leaned in and dropped his voice. Don't spook people, son. We are fine. Then you won't mind me looking under the hood, I said. He clapped my shoulder as if that settled it. Smart purchasing, he repeated, a benediction for shortcuts. I left with a clean checklist, the smell of lacquer in my coat, and a visitor sticker curling at the edge. At the door, I checked my phone again. The message waited like a sealed envelope. Unit 4B2 AM, bring a camera. I set my alarm for 1:35 and pictured a metal door under sodium lights, waiting to tell me what the spreadsheets had already started to say. Before the sodium lights and the storage unit, there was a 2-bay garage with a warped roll-up door and a kerosene heater that coughed in winter. Dad hung a hand-painted sign, Walker Fixtures, above a workbench made from a hollow core door and sawhorses. In those early photos, he is lean, sawdust in his hair, eyes set on a horizon only he could see. Mom is there with a ledger and a thermos, sleeves pushed up, making the numbers meet in pencil. By 2018, that garage had become a 72,000-square-foot shop on Eastbrook Road. 3 shifts humming, 84 people earning their mortgage payments and braces, and little league fees cutting, sanding, finishing. We built retail build-outs that outlived trends and recessions, cash wraps that still shine under fluorescent aisles, maple shelving that never sagged. The phone rang because we delivered, not because we were cheap. I grew up on that floor. I swept corners where sawdust drifted like snow. Luz taught me to read a cut list and to keep fingers away from blades that don't forgive. Uncle Joe, foreman, fixer, patient teacher, showed me how to square a face frame with a framing square and a tap of a mallet. He would say, level is an opinion, plumb is a fact, and I learned to love facts. I left after college to build software with a friend who had a slide deck and a smile that could raise seed money. We created in 2019, 6 months after launch. Our churn was a cliff, our cash was a whisper. The day we closed the bank account, I sat in my car and dialed my father. He didn't pick up. Later, in the shop, he told anyone within earshot that I was book smart, not shop smart. The lines stuck because it fit how he needed to see me. Distance set in, holidays got shorter, phone calls got rarer. Luz kept texting me shop gossip like lifelines, who had a new baby who needed extra Saturday hours, whose truck broke down. Loyalty, she taught me, isn't agreeing, it's telling the truth softly enough to be heard. She saved paychecks by moving money between cost centers when cash pinched, never stealing a dime, always leaving a paper trail. One day you'll need to thread a needle, she said. Practice now. Uncle Joe put his body into that place. His mortgage payment hit on the 1st, every month, and he never missed it. His daughter, Anna, started nursing school on a scholarship and a part-time job. He used to leave the shop, stop at her campus, and sit in the parking lot with a brown bag lunch just to be near where her future was being built. If a predatory buyer stripped the company, Joe would land somewhere. But the health insurance that covered Anna's insulin would reset. The shift differentials that paid her books would evaporate. The shop wasn't numbers on a P and L to him. It was the table his family ate at. That's what was at stake. Not my ego, not a chance to prove a point. Payroll taxes filed on time so guys like Travis don't get love letters from the IRS because someone robbed Peter to pay Paul. Medical benefits that actually paid claims. Vendor relationships built over decades with mills who extended terms because we never stiffed them. If Bluestone or a distressed buyer took control under covenant default, those relationships would be renegotiated with a stopwatch. Cash is cold. Covenants are colder. We had survived recessions by being boring. We didn't play games with rebates or chase shiny suppliers with brochures. We bought what we could measure. The story top line up, best year ever, sounds good at a barbecue. It dies under bank covenant that says your borrowing base shrinks when receivables age out. It dies when sales tax and withholding go past due, and the Department of Revenue posts a warrant with your name on it in a courthouse a mile from your mother's church. Mom has always been the softest part of this whole thing. She could stretch $1 and a Sunday roast and your patience with a single look. Years ago, when I was home for a weekend, I asked to print a boarding pass at her desk. I opened the right drawer and saw a promissory note paper clipped to a savings statement, dated 2015, principal $40,000, maker Elaine Walker, payee Jordan Walker, memo college savings loan. It was countersigned by Dad. I stared long enough to understand it wasn't a gift. It was a hole patched with my name. I closed the drawer and told no one. It would matter later, not as a cudgel, but as a lever. The chaplain the shop hired after a guy on third shift lost his brother keeps a thermos by the roll-up door and prays with whoever asks. When I walked out after that ISO tour, he stopped me with a palm up. "Don't burn the place down to prove a point," he said. The line landed like a nail set flush. I nodded. Burning was never the plan. Building was. The cold math is simple. Bluestone holds a blanket lien. If they smell fraud, they sweep. The landlord can block an SBA funding with one unsigned estoppel. Good people get hurt in the space where pride and cash flow collide. At 2 a.m., Unit 4B would answer questions spreadsheets hinted at. After that, sentiment would wait. I needed a blueprint, clean papers, quiet signatures, a shield with my name hidden, because the only way to save the shop was to outplan pride. By the time the clock hit 3:10 a.m. and the storage unit door clanged shut behind a forklift I recognized, I knew improvisation would get people hurt. I needed a war room, calm, papered, and uninteresting to anyone who liked drama more than detail. The goal wasn't to win an argument, it was to survive a process. I started with a mask that could breathe. We formed Northwind Acquisition LLC in Delaware, registered agent on Market Street, sole member, Northwind Trust. The trust was revocable, with me as beneficiary and a professional trustee to keep my name off anything that could spook a prideful seller. Harper & Lane LLP filed the articles and drafted a simple operating agreement with one purpose: buy assets, not headaches. I opened a separate email domain, stood up a clean data room, and named the project the way Uncle Joe taught me to check a wall: Project Plum. Dana Harper slid an engagement letter across a conference table and underlined 3 words: Asset Purchase Agreement. "You want a clean perimeter," she said. "No successor liability for payroll taxes, sales tax, or whatever this rebate theater is." We listed the assets: equipment, inventory, customer lists, trade name, domain, work in process, and excluded what didn't serve the future: intercompany loans, accrued but unpaid taxes, and any obligations tied to the Midwest panel arrangement. She drafted a no-shop clause, interim operating covenants, a non-solicit and non-compete for the sellers, and a transition services agreement so purchasing and payroll could keep breathing while we changed the blood type. The bank came next. Stonebridge Community Bank wasn't flashy, but their SBA desk answered the phone and spoke in full sentences. We walked through a 7A structure, $3.2 million term loan, 10-year amortization, prime plus 1.75%, full personal guarantee, with a debt service coverage ratio target of at least 1.25x on normalized cash flow. Ethan Kim, their credit officer, asked for 3 years of business tax returns, interim financials, AR and AP agings, a 13-week cash flow, and draft purchase terms. SBA will count a fully standby seller note toward equity, he said, but the standby has to be hard, no payments for 2 years. I nodded. We can live with that. On May 2, 2023, Northwind delivered a letter of intent, $3.8 million purchase price, roughly 5 times normalized EBITDA of $760,000. Funding, $3.2 million SBA 7A, $400,000 seller note, on full standby, $200,000 cash from me. We proposed a 10% holdback for indemnity, capped at 20% of purchase price with a 24-month survival window. A $175,000 tax escrow would sit at the title company for potential payroll or sales tax exposures we'd spotted in county files. Asset deal, the LOI read, subject to diligence. Dad called it insulting, I called it standard. Diligence would be 45 days, no extensions unless caused by the sellers. We opened the data room and posted a request list that read like a grocery list for grown-ups. IRS Forms 941 for 8 quarters, wage detail reports, sales tax returns by jurisdiction, customer contracts with assignment clauses, flag clause 12.4 for anti-assignment, vendor agreements, UCC search results, lien payoff letters, litigation disclosures, environmental reports, OSHA logs, and a weekly 13-week cash flow with receipts and disbursements uploaded every Friday by noon. Handshakes are enough, Dad said over the phone. They aren't, I said, and sent the link. Marcus Lee, CFE CPA, built a quality of earnings that treated rumor like noise and cash like language. He normalized EBITDA by stripping out one-time COVID credits, owner's add-backs that didn't pass a straight-face test, and the monthly consulting fees to Midwest panel brokers that we believed were kickbacks. He mapped gross margin erosion and tied it to a mix shift that didn't explain the delta. He created a waterfall that showed earnings if we restored pricing and cut out the rebates, then tested sensitivity if receivables aged back to a sane 48 days. The model delivered what my gut felt. This was a good shop with a bad diet. Harper & Lane's M&A team started pulling thread. The asset purchase agreement grew teeth, reps on financial statements, compliance with tax obligations, absence of undisclosed liabilities, legality of vendor arrangements, and no related party transactions except as disclosed. The sellers pushed to water down the related party rep. We pushed back and asked them to list every entity with the Walker name formed in the last 36 months. Walker Advanced LLC. Dana asked over speakerphone. Silence stretched long enough to hear paper move. That's a reserve vehicle, their counsel said. We added a schedule and an instruction. No transfers, no liens, no dispositions outside ordinary course without our consent. We priced R&W insurance to see if it made sense. For a sub-$5 million deal, the premium and retentions ate any comfort it bought. We stuck with the 10% holdback and clear indemnity mechanics. Notice, cure, cap, basket, survival. The escrow agreement was boring and glorious. Sign here, release on this date, absent claims, carve-outs for fraud. Boring closes, Dana said. Loud breaks. Reputation needed its own checklist. I retained Brightline HR on a small retainer, and we pre-built a day one packet. New hire forms with no interruption to tenure, a 401k rollover plan keyed to the same fund lineup, a COBRA script should anyone choose to leave, and a benefits summary that matched or bettered existing coverage. I wired a day one payroll buffer into escrow, a week and a half of gross pay, so if Bluestone decided to flex or a seller forgot to run hours, we could cover every check without blinking. Nobody misses a deposit, I told Ethan. That's non-negotiable. Vendors got a plan too. We drafted continuity letters to mills and hardware suppliers. Ownership change, terms honored, new remittance address, same people on the dock. We created a script for accounts payable to call critical suppliers one by one the morning of closing with routing numbers and a voice they recognized. We wrote a lean PR line for the local business journal, a transition designed to preserve jobs and service levels, and then put it in a folder labeled only if necessary. Noise helps no one when cash is thin. Inside the shop, I asked Luz to keep doing what she does, reconcile hours, log shipments, and text me if anyone started clearing desks after dark. She wasn't a spy, She was the only person other than Uncle Joe who could say no to my father and still keep her job. We agreed on one rule: no lies. If anyone asked what Northwind was, she would say a buyer. If anyone asked who I worked for, she would say myself. Before we proceed, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you are listening. Stories like this travel farther than the walls that built them, and sometimes the right set of eyes keeps a door open when a harder shove would have closed it. Back in the war room, we built contingencies. If Bluestone swept the operating account, the escrow would fund payroll and critical vendors, while Stonebridge wired the purchase price. If the sellers dragged their feet on consents, we drafted a step-in for key customer contracts with anti-assignment clauses, supported by a schedule of cure notices. If Greg tried to clean up QuickBooks, we had the audit trail and off-site backups. Atlas Investigations kept watching the warehouse at odd hours. We didn't need heroics, just headlights. Weekly, Stonebridge asked for updates. I sent a clean 13-week cash flow with confidence bands, base, downside, severe. I added a staffing schedule with a 12-month no-layoff pledge. We planned to announce post-close for hourly and the third shift. Ethan didn't promise anything, but the questions shifted from if to what happens when. He wanted collateral descriptions, a lien position behind the landlord's fixture filing, and a draft of the landlord's estoppel. That last piece looked simple on paper and complicated in life. The lease on Eastbrook required the landlord's consent to assignment and an estoppel certificate confirming the lease was in good standing. Without it, the SBA wouldn't fund and Stonebridge wouldn't close. The landlord was a small LLC run by a man who treated my father like a nephew. He didn't return calls promptly, and he didn't sign things he didn't understand. Dana underlined the clause and wrote one word in the margin: Gates. At the same time, the seller's counsel kept trying to substitute language. Handshakes are enough, Dad grumbled when he saw the holdback and tax escrow. We've been paying taxes for 30 years. I didn't correct him. Instead, I pointed to warrant TW221741 and slid over a county printout. This is why we escrow, I said. He called it mistrust. I called it math. Greg tried to wedge Midwest Panel into the Transition Services Agreement as a preferred partner. We struck it and added a representation that there were no side letters, co-op arrangements, or rebates not disclosed in the schedules, and that no officer or family member had a financial interest in any vendor. Dana's voice was level when she said it. You sign this, or we don't close. Their counsel asked for a weekend. We gave them 48 hours, and a reminder that Bluestone's borrowing base was tested on Mondays. To keep my name out of the wind, we limited in-person meetings and routed questions through Harper and Lane. When I had to show up, I wore the visitor badge and carried the ISO clipboard. Let them see what they expected to see. At night, I met with HR about benefit continuity and with Marcus about inventory integrity. He flagged an adjustment process he didn't like and asked Atlas to get a wait ticket at the storage unit the next time the door rolled up. Details, not declarations. We also prepared for a quieter kind of damage: shame. A family company changing hands under pressure draws gossip. We drafted a pastor-safe, grandmother-safe line my mother could say without choking on it. We found a buyer who believes in the work. We wrote a letter for my father that let him keep dignity without surrendering facts. Whether he'd use it, I didn't know, but we didn't leave it to chance. The closer we got to signatures, the more the machine mattered. Term sheets turned into closing checklists, checklists into initials. The asset purchase agreement locked. The escrow agreement sat ready. The seller note terms went hard standby. The tax escrow wires were queued. Stonebridge's commitment letter, conditional on diligence and consents, lay on the table beside a stack of documents with colored flags. Then the bank's credit committee did what committees do. They looked past the story to the hinge. We have one deal breaker, Ethan said on a Thursday call, a single signature we don't control. Without it, we can't fund the SBA loan, and without the SBA loan, we can't close. He didn't have to say which signature. I had already underlined the clause and circled the name. The gate was closing, and the only way through was the person least inclined to hand me a pen. The leak didn't sound like a whistle. It sounded like a printer spitting out a new LLC record. On June 12, the state registry posted a fresh filing. Walker Advanced Fixtures, LLC, manager managed, organizer Daniel Proctor, Greg Hanley's brother-in-law. 2 hours later, a DocuSign envelope hit a customer's inbox with a quiet amendment moving volume rebates and marketing co-op rights from Walker Fixtures, Inc. to that brand new shell. Same fonts, same boilerplate, a different beneficiary. We watched the paper trail mutate in real time. A customer contract we'd flagged in diligence sprouted a clause 14.7, assignment of rebates, payable now to Walker Advanced Fixtures. A vendor addendum slid signature, blocks 5 inches to the right and redirected IP from work for hire to licensor retains all methods and shop drawings. On the surface, it looked like housekeeping. In the bones, it was an escape hatch. Atlas called from Eastbrook Storage. "You're going to want to see this," the pie said, and sent photos that smelled like humidity and dust even on a screen. Under sodium lights, pallet jacks ferried shrink-wrapped cherry and maple from a rented truck into Unit 4B until the stacks rose past a man's shoulders. The forklift with the matching scrape on the mast bobbed in the doorway like a piston. They weren't stealing junk. They were moving the good stuff, the stock you use when a client demands no knots and perfect grain. My parents felt the pressure like weather. Greg briefed them in a way that tacked flattery to fear. A rival buyer lurked, the bank was circling, only a fast move could save jobs. Pride does the rest. That afternoon, a message lit the company group chat. "Heads up," Dad wrote from his phone. "There's a vulture in a hoodie trying to pick over what we built. Don't engage, we're protecting the shop." The screenshot made it to me in a minute. I read it twice. The hoodie fit. The word vulture didn't. Harper and Lane moved to litigation footing. Dana fired off a preservation notice to Walker Fixtures and to Greg personally, stop purging QuickBooks backups, Slack threads, emails, phones. She followed with a spoliation letter and a draft complaint that could be filed if inventory kept walking. We tightened our chain of custody logs, file hashes, timestamps, who touched what and when. Every photo got a checksum. Every Slack export got a digest. I have never loved math more than when it made fiction expensive. Their counsel went the other way. By evening, he had filed an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order, naming Northwind Acquisition LLC an unknown acquirer and accusing us of tortious interference and unfair dealing. The papers read like a mirror with the glass swapped, that we'd spooked vendors, pressured employees, and meddled in contracts. They asked a judge to enjoin us from contact with counterparties and to award attorneys' fees. Dana scanned, annotated, and called me. "They're loud," she said. "We'll be precise." In the middle of that, the unknown texter stepped out of the shadows. Her name was Nia. She emailed from a personal address, asked to meet in the back booth of a diner by the highway, and arrived with a thumb drive and clear eyes. "He told me to purge the QuickBooks backups," she said, hands folded on Formica. "Change the retention on Slack. Delete anything with rebate or Midwest." "I won't." She slid the drive across. "I'm not lying under oath for somebody else's pride." Back at Harper and Lane, we plugged the thumb drive into a quarantine laptop and watched invoices populate a folder tree. PDF headers, Midwest Panel Brokers LLC. Invoice numbers, MPB 23011044, MPB 23020071, MPB 23033117. Descriptions, marketing rebate, 8% Q1 allocation, each addressed to Walker Fixtures, approved in DocuSign by G. Hanley admin. The attachments included remittance advices showing outbound ACHs the same day to Hanley Family Trust UA 2014, account at Red River Wealth Custody, memo, MKTG RBATE. It wasn't tricky. It was brazen in its paperwork. Marcus crosswalked the invoice totals to the consulting line we'd been tracking. It tied. We took Nia's statement carefully. Dana typed, read it back, asked Nia to initial each page, date, time, place, who said what, and the instruction to purge. Nia nodded through the ugly parts, then took a breath. "I liked my job," she said. "I liked being able to look my mother in the eye more. She didn't want money. She wanted to hand off a weight she didn't earn." While we numbered pages, Atlas sent another clip. Unit 4B's door yawning at 1:57 a.m. License plate from the rental truck crisp under the light. The driver in a ball cap we recognized from our own receiving dock. Chain of custody entries wrote themselves. 6/14/02, 11 photo IMG 1782 JPG, SHA 256 hash, stored on drive A. Backup to be their frantic shell game only made our logs tidier. Stonebridge was less poetic. Ethan Kim asked for a call. "We've read the TRO," he said, voice steady. "We've reviewed the invoices and the PI footage. If this isn't resolved and a change of control plan isn't signed, our credit committee will call a covenant default in 7 days. We can't sit in the blast radius. 7 days isn't a number, it's a metronome in your ear." I didn't argue with timelines. We accelerated ours. Dana filed an opposition to the TRO that laid out the public documents like fence posts, Bluestone's UCC, the tax warrants, the Atlas photos, the audit trail, the invoices to the trust. She attached Nia's affidavit under penalty of perjury. We were not contacting vendors to spook them. We were documenting a diversion and trying to stop a fire sale. If the court wanted silence while it decided, we would live within that order. But a gag that enabled more midnight moves was a bridge too far. At dinner, my phone buzzed with a different vibration. The certified letter was from my parents' home address, green card stapled to the corner. Inside lay the 2015 promissory note I had seen in Mom's desk, $40,000, payable to me, countersigned by Dad. No letter, no comment, just paper that smelled like a drawer. I put it in my briefcase and closed the flap. Levers work best when you don't wave them around. The group chat kept churning, accusations braided with loyalty, jokes to cut tension, a meme of a carnivore bird in a sweatshirt. I stayed out of it. Luz texted once, "People want to know if Friday's checks are safe." I replied with 3 words, "They will clear." Then I called the escrow officer and increased the day 1 peril buffer by another half week. Insurance against other people's pride. Their counsel filed a supplemental declaration about theft at the storage unit and misappropriation of property by unknown parties. Atlas's timestamps turned that paragraph into kindling. The property wasn't unknown. The entity leasing 4B shared a last name with ours, a coincidence too cute by half, and the forklift came from our floor. Judges don't love melodrama, they like receipts. When I finally slept, it was with Ethan's 7-day clock ticking on the nightstand and the image of Unit 4B's metal door in my head. We didn't need to beat them in a shouting match. We needed that one signature, a judge who preferred paper to panic, and enough calm to outlast a storm we didn't start. The next morning I woke up already counting. 7, 6, 5, the diner off Route 9 keeps the lights low, sugar caddies dented, secrets comfortable. Luz slid into the booth, denim jacket, hair pulled back, hands still dusted from the shop. She didn't waste a sentence. From her tote, she pulled a USB in a Ziploc and a spiral notebook that smelled of coffee and lacquer. "You'll want both," she said. She opened to April, pages furred with eraser crumbs and grease. "I owe your folks everything," she said, "but I won't lie for them." Her finger tapped the week starting Monday the 10th. Each day listed receiving times, truck numbers, pallet counts in her compact script. 38 pallets in, she said, gone by morning. Then at month end, Greg runs scrap adjustments that never touched a dumpster. I traced the line. April 11 matched the PI timestamp. 2:08 a.m. Eastbrook Storage, Unit 4B. The log showed 48x96 maple, FAS grade, 22 pallets plus 16 of clear cherry. The inventory module from Greg's office showed no outflow. "Scrap?" she asked, shaking her head. "We cut our waste to ribbons. 38 pallets don't vanish into sawdust." She turned the USB in her fingers. "Emily copied the receiving screens before they changed," she said. "I don't want her dragged in, but you should see what we saw before it got true-upped." I took the drive, set it on the table, and photographed the notebook pages one by one, the camera chime muffled by the grill. Chain of custody in a diner, page number, timestamp, Luz's initials in the corner. "Greg said we had a new program," she said. "The rebate would make the numbers smile. I asked where product went when it arrived after hours. He said, "Don't be dramatic." She looked at me dry-eyed. "I've cleaned blood off that floor. Nothing about me is dramatic." I nodded. "You could stay out of it," I said. She shrugged. "And tell Joe I kept quiet while someone stole his overtime." "No, I'll tell the truth and let God sort the rest." My phone buzzed on the Formica. Aunt Rosa had forwarded a photo from the break room, a whiteboard taken at an angle, blue markers scrawled across the top, Plan B, move everything to 4B by Friday, names and arrows underneath like a football play. I rotated the screen and slid it to Luz. She pressed her lips together and exhaled through her nose. "Then you don't have until Friday," she said. "You have today." An hour later we sat in Stonebridge's conference room. Ethan Kim stacked documents into lanes. Nia's invoices, Atlas's photos, Marcus's coffee deck, Luz's notebook. He didn't perform, he listened. Marcus walked through the earning bridge in a low voice, gross margin compressed by consulting fees tied to Midwest panel brokers, inventory adjustments used as a broom, bank statements that rhymed with the invoices. Luz pointed to her logs without looking at Greg's name. Ethan asked banal questions that weren't. How many pallets in a truck? How long to cycle from receiving to cut? Who had keys to receiving after hours? Where do scrap bins weigh in? He wanted to see if the story leaked when pressure was applied. It didn't. He studied the photo of the forklift, the scrape on the mast matching the one in our shop, then set it gently aside like a teacher returning a test. He tapped the table twice, a metronome you felt more than heard. "If we back you," he said, eyes on me, "what happens to the third shift?" The room held its breath. I answered without looking at my notes. "I'll sign a 12-month no-layoff pledge for hourly, including third. We'll adjust pay based on seniority, not favorites. Overtime gets scheduled, not begged. We'll restore vendor terms, cut the kickbacks, and fix DSO with collections that don't punish the floor." Luz stared at the table and nodded once. I added what mattered off spreadsheet. 401k stays with a match. Health plan stays or improves. We cross-drain where it makes sense so no one gets stranded when a press goes down. Safety stays sacred. We'll show up on the floor, not just on paper. Ethan's face didn't move, but his shoulders softened. He turned to Marcus. "Under those assumptions, debt service coverage at base case, 1.3, Marcus said. Higher if the rebate spend dies." Ethan nodded, then laid out the hinge. "We can issue a commitment conditioned on two things: denial of the TRO or a stipulated order that lets you close, and a signed landlord estoppel and consent to assignment. Without the estoppel, SBA won't fund. Without SBA, we don't have a deal. I need the landlord comfortable, and I need your parents to ask him for it." He looked at Luz. "Can you live with this if it goes public?" "I can live with myself," she said. Outside, traffic thinned to a whisper. The 7-day clock was already short a day. I put Luz's notebook back in her hands and kept the scans. Ethan gathered the piles into one stack and slid me a copy of the draft commitment with blank lines waiting for signatures we didn't control. On the sidewalk, my phone vibrated again, the whiteboard photo followed by a second line, "Counting on you." I didn't know if Aunt Rosa meant me or the better angels of our family name. Either way, the gate we needed was guarded by pride and a pen and one stubborn signature. By Wednesday morning, the story had a headline and my family's name under it. The Business Journal ran a tidy piece. Family-owned fixtures firm explores sale amid bank pressure. A paragraph on UCC filings, a quote from a bank source, and it traveled the way local news travels, texted, screenshotted, misread. At the shop, the floor split clean down the middle. Some called me a traitor before lunch. Others stopped by Luz's desk and whispered, "Maybe this saves us." 2 bench carpenters walked out for a plastics plant that paid a signing bonus. A finisher asked if the health plan would survive a sale and then asked if I could promise it. I told him the truth, not yet, but that was the point of the plan. Vendors reacted with the speed of people who have been burned before. Merrimack Millwork put us on COD by noon. Their dispatcher stamped the bill of lading in red. The adhesive rep wanted a cashier's check, not a promise. Midland Hardware called to say that purchase orders wouldn't ship without a pre-wire. We didn't argue, we documented. Greg sent an all-staff email at 3:04 p.m., effective immediately. "I'm resigning for personal reasons." He CC'd the outside accountant and the lawyer who filed the TRO submitted a motion for a continuance, citing the need to prepare affidavits and gather exhibits. Delay is a tactic when facts hurt. Dana filed an opposition and attached a photo of Unit 4B's midnight ballet. Stonebridge answered with a letter that was both lifeline and leash. They'd forbear through July 27 if we kept cash in a clean box, daily borrowing base, no payments over $10,000 without approval, no transfers to related entities, and a signed change of control agreement by that date. Miss a condition, and the forbearance dies. Ethan didn't threaten. He read the terms like a weather report. Public noise grew teeth. The group chat swung between memes and warnings. "You'll sell us to the first suit with a spreadsheet," one message read. Another said, "If he saves third shift, I don't care what he wears." My phone filled with calls. I let roll to voicemail so I could keep my hands steady on the parts that mattered. Mom left me a voicemail that sounded like a prayer and a warning braided together. "I know you think you're helping," she said, voice small, "and maybe you are. Just don't turn this into something you can't put back." She paused long enough to make space for forgiveness, then said she made an extra casserole. Dad didn't bother with breath. "If you do this," his text read, "don't bother coming around." I rechecked cash, then counsel. Payroll buffer, intact. Vendor wires, sequenced, with Midland and Merrimack first. The escrow officer confirmed closing funds could clear before Bluestone's sweep window. Dana rehearsed arguments for the TRO hearing and printed exhibits with tabs. Marcus reran coverage ratios, assuming 2 more employees walked, and 1 key customer demanded net 30. The plan bent in places and held. Uncle Joe caught me by the loading dock and asked one question. "Are you going to make Friday?" I told him yes, and watched his shoulders drop an inch. "Then the rest is noise," he said, and went back to a jig he'd been adjusting since 2004. Luz texted a single check mark when the time clock closed and the hours matched. Small mercies keep a shop from eating itself. I packed a 9x12 envelope and wrote my father's name on the front in blue ink. Inside, one document could open the gate Stonebridge needed, the kind of paper that looks harmless until it is. I sealed it and put it in my briefcase. It would stay shut until a table, a judge, and a clock agreed. I also changed one thing no one could see. The welcome to the new Walker fixtures email I had queued for day 0 moved to T+2 hours. 2 hours is long enough for wires to clear, for a certain window to close. I'll explain the reason when it matters. For now, the right silence buys more than the wrong speech. Tomorrow, that sealed envelope would decide leverage, and the court would listen. The courtroom smelled like old paper and polished wood. Chancery moves faster when money is bleeding, and the judge had read every tab we'd put in front of her. Dana stood, voice even, and walked through the chain, invoices to Midwest panel brokers, ACHs to the Hanley Family Trust, Atlas's photos of Unit 4B at 2 in the morning, the QuickBooks audit trail with G. Hanley admin approving rebates that never touched price. Their brief called it industry standard. The judge leaned forward. "You're asking me to silence a buyer documenting potential diversion," she said. The rebates looked suspiciously like kickbacks, she added, and the room stopped pretending. No likelihood of success on the merits, TRO denied. At 10:30 a.m. we reconvened at the title office, fluorescent lights humming the way they did the first day. The escrow officer sorted colored flags. Stonebridge's counsel dialed in. My parents sat together, his hand on a folder, hers on a tissue. I set a sealed envelope in front of my father. "This is the landlord estoppel," I said, "the one you haven't signed." Beside it I placed Nia's invoices, Marcus's COF-E, Stonebridge's covenant default letter, and the 2015 promissory note for $40,000 with my name on it. "I'll forgive this note, honor your name on the building, and keep every employee for 12 months, I said. "You sign the estoppel now and we close. If you don't, Bluestone sweeps the account Friday and the decision leaves this room." He stared at the paper as if it had teeth. Mom's eyes were wet but steady. Their attorney started to speak. Dana lifted a finger just enough to remind him who had the floor. My father clicked his pen twice, then signed the estoppel with the slow care of a man writing his initials in wet cement. The escrow officer notarized, stamped, and breathed. "We are clear to close," she said. Stonebridge wired. The screen blinked green, liens released like locks opening in sequence. I waited for the last confirmation and then told the truth to the room. "Northwind is me," I said. "The guy you called a failure just saved your company from a fire sale." And I meant every word about the third shift. The day zero email to employees had been rescheduled for T plus 2 hours. Wires can be revoked, and I wanted the sweep window closed before anyone made a speech. 2 hours after funds settled, the message went out with a short video of me on the shop floor. "We build things right," I said. "That includes how we treat people." Attached was a one-page pledge. No layoffs for 12 months for hourly, seniority-based adjustments, direct mill purchasing, and a clean code of conduct that banned rebates dressed as consulting fees. Locks changed on Unit 4B before sunset. The Walker Advanced lease was terminated for breach. We reinstated direct accounts with Maple Ridge and Ash River Mills, reset terms, and sent COD wires to anyone spooked. Marcus and Luz led a wall-to-wall inventory. The forklift scrape shrugged past us like a relic from a story already over. Dana filed a civil demand letter to Greg for breach of fiduciary duty. Stonebridge forwarded the invoices to their fraud unit. The state reviewed the tax warrants. Nia took an AP job 2 towns over within a week. She didn't want a parade. She wanted peace. My mother hugged me in the parking lot and said nothing you could hear. My father shook my hand like it was a tool he wasn't used to holding anymore. I kept his name on the building, exactly as promised. Uncle Joe ran third shift that Friday with a smile no one had seen in months. Luz moved into a director title without ceremony. Vendors that had gone COD called back to say net 30 is fine, and for the first time in too long, payroll cleared early. Northwind wasn't a trick, it was a brace. The trust kept my name off filings long enough to keep pride from tearing out studs, long enough to stop midnight inventory moves, shell amendments, and a rumor mill that would have cost real jobs. Silence is a tool when you use it to build. When we finally spoke, it was with signed papers, not speeches. This is a fictionalized story for entertainment. It is not legal or financial advice. Before we proceed, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you are listening. When I drive past the plant at night now, the lights on Eastbrook burn like a steady pulse, and somewhere in the back, you can hear the third shift laughing over the whine of a sander. That sound is what justice looks like where I come from. It is quiet, and it lasts longer than anger.